Thank you. And we will start off with a roll call.
Councilmember Derwin,
Here.
Councilmember Alves,
Here.
Councilmember Richards,
Here.
Vice Mayor Wernicott, here, Mayor Hughes.
Here. And before we get started, I would like to introduce everybody to our new attendee who you may not have met before. You may if you've stopped by Town Hall and bumped into her. Our new town clerk, Melissa, is here tonight for the first time in person with us. So if you hear her voice or if you see her in the corner of the screen, that is who she is. There she is, smiling at us.
Welcome.
Welcome. Okay, Jeremy, I saw your hand went up briefly. Did you?
It was a user error. Sorry.
Okay, understandable. I'm looking at the wrong agenda packet. That was the meeting. Okay, first item on tonight's agenda is a report out of closed session from our last meeting. The closed session item was council discussion on the town attorney's performance and contract renewal. And the contract arising from that is on the agenda for later tonight. I don't believe there was anything else to report out. Was there, Cara?
That's correct. Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any comment on this item? Members of the public, any comment on this item? Seeing none, we will move on to oral communications, which is the time for members of the public to address the council on any matter that is not on tonight's agenda. If you would like to do so, please raise your hand now. And I see no hands raised, so we will move on to item 4 is a non-item, so we'll skip item 4 and move on to item 5, the consent agenda. The consent agenda items are voted on as one by the body and one vote generally, unless a member of the body requests items to be considered separately. Members of the public are permitted to comment on any item on the consent calendar before we vote on the consent agenda. Would anybody like to comment on any item on the consent agenda?
I don't really need to comment. I just need to check with Cara. If I wasn't at the meeting, do I abstain? There are different rules on different boards I sit in. So Cara, if I wasn't at the meeting, do I need to abstain from voting on the minutes? Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that question, but no, you if as long as even if you are not at the meeting, you can still vote on the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment on any item on the consent agenda? No, would anybody like to pull an item from the consent agenda? I would like to pull item 5D. I just have a question for staff about it. Is there a motion on the remaining items?
I'll make a motion.
Moved by Sarah,
Second.
seconded Mary Ann. Melissa, can you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Derwin,
Aye.
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wernicott,
Aye.
Mayor Hughes.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I had a question for staff on item 5D, the annual housing element progress report. And my question was related to the listing on there of the Willow Commons housing units under our and how they score towards our RENA allocation for the current cycle. I know we've had some discussions in the past around how many units we might be able to carry over into our next cycle for units that are kind of in the process of being developed now and aren't necessarily completed. So I was just looking for clarification on that. Are those units counting towards the current cycle and they would not then count towards the coming cycle? Or is there some way where they sort of count towards both? They're reporting them now, but they'll actually count later or something like that?
Thanks. Good evening, Laura Russell, Planning and Building Director. This is an interesting aspect of the housing element law in that we do report it when the building permit is issued for the net new housing units. So Willow Commons has not been issued yet. All the steps haven't gone through yet this year. We are counting it in the housing element cycle for the next time. So we are allowed to count pipeline projects is what they're called. There's a definition and there's a date cutoff. So we'll be counting the Willow Commons units towards the next housing element cycle.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. With that, is there a motion on item 5D?
Make a motion on item 5D.
I actually had a quick question. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So I just a quick question. Program 1, the inclusionary housing. I'm actually I just want to make sure I understand. Inclusionary housing is basically sort of the fees we collect from subdivisions that specifically ones that don't trigger like an actual building, actual low income unit. And then just the question of what we do with the money from that. Is that the inclusionary housing program? Is there
Yes.
anything- Okay.
They imagined amending the inclusionary housing program last time around, but
Right.
the way that things evolved, we realized it probably was not best to amend it the way they imagined and instead analyze that with the next housing element update.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments from council members? If not, I will open for public comment also on this item, and I see Christy Corley's hand is up. Go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, I have a question. When you were asking, you were saying that our town is 20 units an acre and now it's 50 units an acre. Can you please describe that in detail, how that changed?
Christy, it sounds like it's probably a comment that will be best handled offline. So if you could contact staff maybe offline and
This is a real housing question that changed in the housing process that I thought maybe the planning director could let us know about.
this is a report on the housing production that we've done in the past year, not on the new housing element.
I think it's in the plans and residents have a question about this and we deserve an answer.
That's fine. That's not the agenda item in front of us. So if you'd like to take that up with staff offline, then that would be the appropriate place to do it. Thank you. Okay, is there a motion then on item 5D? I see no more hands raised.
I'll make a motion on 5D to approve.
I will second.
Moved by Sarah, seconded by Jeff. Could you please call the roll, Melissa?
Councilmember Durin,
Aye.
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wernicott,
Aye.
and Mayor Hughes.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us to our regular agenda. Item 6A is the adoption of a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign Amendment 2 to the Town Attorney Legal Services Agreement. Jeremy, are you introducing this?
I can very briefly for you. Sorry, I was clicking over. As you know, the town contracts with Jorgensen, Siegel, McClure, and Flagel for legal services. That is a typical arrangement for smaller cities not having an in-house attorney arrangement. It provides the town with a variety of additional resources that aren't typically available through the firm. And the council met in a closed session to discuss contract amendments to those services that are available for review, starting on page 53 of the staff report. And happy to take any questions that you might have. Probably best directed to Cara as it relates to any specificity within the contract. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm also happy to answer questions. Jeremy wasn't present for the negotiation of this, and the attorney does not report to him. She reports directly to the council. So questions probably more suitably directed towards us. Are there any council member questions on this item? Nope, I don't see any. So is there any public comment on this item?
No hand raised.
No hands raised. Council discussion? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Mr. Mayor, before you vote on this, I did want to just state for the record that under the Brown Act, we do need to disclose any terms that have changed since the original contract. And so the hourly rate for development work has changed from $325 an hour to $375 an hour effective July 1st.
Okay, thank you. And then there's also the term of the agreement has changed, so it's renewed for 2 years, and on expire for 2 years from now, will then move to month to month and automatically renew. Is that also correct? Okay, thank you. Is there a motion then?
I'll move approval.
Moved by John,
Second.
seconded by Mary Ann. Can you call the roll, please, Melissa?
Councilmember Durbin,
Aye.
Councilmember Else,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wernicott.
Aye.
Mayor Hughes.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And that brings us to 6B. Item 6B is a designation of voting delegates and alternates for the League of California Cities Annual Conference and Exposition, which is in Long Beach, as it always is, in early September. And I think in the past, it's been infrequently, if ever. I don't know if any of us have ever attended. You've been, Mary Ann has been.
I've been many times.
Oh, okay. Do you wanna go
Before
again?
your day, youngin. No, I don't wish to go. And I've been to Long Beach. For a newish council member, I think it's great. You meet people from all over the state. They have some very good programs.
Mhm. So I guess the purpose of this being on the agenda tonight, and Melissa, maybe you can talk some more about it. I think you're more familiar probably through your work in other cities with this than we are, other than Mary Ann, who's been there before, and we've seen this before, I think, but in recent years we haven't been. Would any council member like to volunteer to go to Long Beach in September?
My issue is I'll be dropping a kid off at college on the East Coast over that time.
Yeah, I might go if there were a remote option, but it doesn't appear that there is for this.
There's some really good parties. Oh, really? Some of the, I can't remember what they're called. Some really good, right, Jeremy? You've been to this, haven't you?
Been there a few times. It's actually a fantastic event. It's a great networking opportunity. It's also an opportunity to hear the latest and greatest in city municipal activities. Excuse my cat. So I highly recommend it. It's rare that you get, unless you're involved in governance in these bodies, to get the interactions with out of the region elected officials. So I've always found it very, very positive. It is well attended by staff as well.
Mhm.
And they usually have a really good keynote speaker.
Correct. Correct. And I'm contemplating going this year if I can make it work.
Mhm. So there are a number of options here. We don't actually need to decide tonight necessarily on who's going, but or if anybody's going. We could opt to fill in the names of voting delegates and alternates who might go, and then we don't need to revisit this. And then if people decide to go, then they are already authorized. Is that something anybody would be interested in?
I will consider going. I'm sort of depends on what's happening. There's a lot of uncertainty with me regarding September, just in terms of back to school stuff. But I'd be willing to appear on the as our potential, if no one else wants to go, I'd be willing to sort of be on there and consider it and to make a decision a little bit later.
I would be willing to be on there as an alternate as well. So maybe we put Jeff and Craig on there, and if either of us, the scheduling works out, we may go. Does that sound reasonable?
And you'll see a lot of people from the county. A lot of your
Yeah.
colleagues be there.
Okay, do we need to take action on this item, or can we just fill out the form?
No, what we'll do is I will complete the form and send it back to the League of California Cities. There's no action that's required tonight on this item. And then if you choose to go, there will be, like you said, the form will be submitted. And so there will be voting delegates there for Portola Valley to vote on the resolutions presented at the League of California Cities Conference.
Okay, thank you.
And one other tip, if you are going to go, book the hotel early,
Let me know if you're going.
or you might get stuck in one really far away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If one of us is going, would we later need to sort of, as a council, authorize me or Craig to cast those votes, or?
No, I think that the form lays out, essentially, if you're on the form, there's a primary delegate, and then there's an alternate who can vote.
Right. I'm just wondering if, okay, action, oh, sorry, I'm looking at it, yeah.
So if one of us and not the other goes, then.
Well, so it does, we do have to take an action. So it does say that an action is required. Do we want to just put that action off until one of us decides we're actually going?
Let's see. To vote on- Oh, yes, it does say it requires council action. We could just act now to put us as the voting delegate and the alternate. That doesn't mean that we need to go.
Right, that's true. You want, can we, is it agendized properly to act on it, Cara?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay. I do see a hand up from a member of the public. So before anybody makes a motion, if there's no further discussion from council or questions from council, I would go to public comment. Are there further council questions? Nope. Okay. I see Christie's hand up from the public. Go ahead, Christie.
Yes, thank you. I know we pay a fee to do the League of Cities, and this is a conference for the League of Cities of California. And we would love to have representation there. And if you could report back who is attending to the public, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Okay, I see no more hands raised from the public. So is there further discussion and or a motion on this item?
I move the council authorize me as our delegate and Craig as our alternate to vote at the should the occasion arise to vote at the Cal Cities meeting.
Okay.
Second that.
John seconds. Melissa, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Derwin,
Aye.
Councilmember Alves,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wernicott.
Aye.
Mayor Hughes.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, and that brings us to tonight's big item, 6C, a review of the proposed budget for financial year 22-23. Cindy, Jeremy, over to you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to present a draft budget. This year's is for fiscal year 22-23. Tonight, the presentation will be made by your finance director, Cindy Rodas. We're also joined by our fiscal consultant, Jim Sacco. I'll just say a few words. As with every year, this is a hugely collaborative process across the departments. This year was certainly a little different for us in that the council had a preview through a few presentations from staff, primarily from Public Works and the Planning Department, on the direction we were suggesting that we needed to go in vis-a-vis staffing in particular. And so that has been very helpful in advance of the development of the budget. So I'm going to stop there because Cindy has a really great presentation for you. Cindy, take it away.
Thank you, Jeremy. Let me begin to share my screen.
I hope you can all see that.
Yep.
Great. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. My name is Cindy Rodas, Finance Director with the town. Tonight, we are here to present the proposed fiscal year 2022-23 budget. This evening, we will be presenting the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-23. Sorry about that. We will be we'll be looking at some detail related to revenues, expenditures, and proposed projects for the upcoming fiscal year. At the end, we will be happy to take any questions or comments. Overall, the town is in a good position. The budget reflects a strong relationship to council priorities, which include wildfire and emergency preparedness, focus on land use projects and programs, sustainability, operational and service delivery enhancements, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Upcoming in the fall, in October 2022, staff will be presenting quarterly updates on the priorities to council. In this budget, we will also be presenting a modest capital improvement program projects by the number of projects that we will be presenting for the year. There will be a reduction of general fund support to capital as we budget for one-time expenditures using ARPA funds. We will also be budgeting for growth in town staff, continued one-time general plan work, and increases in public safety. In this view here, we have a summary of all of our funds. This view breaks down by category our revenues and expenditures for all funds, as well as operating transfers between funds and the use of fund balance. Again, this view represents all funds along with the general fund. The next slide is pared down to review the summary for our general fund, which includes a snapshot of revenues versus expenditures broken down by categories. Our revenues for fiscal year 22-23 have increased, as have our expenditures. The proposed budget is different in that this will be a deficit budget, whereas in previous budgets, we have run an operational surplus. Previous budgets require general fund balance, or reserves to balance the budget and support the capital improvement program, as well as transportation or the gas tax fund. For fiscal year 2022-23, the operational deficit is $423,796. This deficit is due in part to increased staffing, continued increases in public safety, property and liability insurance increases to the annual premiums, an increase to the fire mitigation program, as well as continued one-time expenditures related to updates in the general plan. Although this is a deficit year, the overall impact on fund balance is still lower than budgeted in fiscal year 2021-22. This amount is under by $73,448. This is due to a modest capital improvement program and support from additional funding sources to reduce the overall general fund expenditures. As you can see from our view here, along with the deficit of the $423,000, as well as the general fund to transportation amount of 126,783 and the 402,000 general fund capital transfer. The total amount required by necessary from fund balance would be $952,653. But the overall impact to fund balance is listed here under the appropriated fund balance amount of $720,096. And this is due to an operating transfers in from the ARPA funds in the amount of $232,557. In this budget year, we will see overall increases in revenues, mainly attributed to property tax growth, sales and use tax growth, and charges for services. We also will see some slight increases in UUT with modest budgeting for the return of recreation classes and a few private events for the new fiscal year, as we experience revenue loss during the pandemic. Under our expenditures for employee services and benefits, we will see an increase, and this will be due to cost of living adjustments of 5.2%. Increases in employee services and benefits to support growth in staff, including 4 new positions, such as full-time development review technician in the planning department, full-time maintenance worker position in public works, full-time accounting technician in the finance department, a part-time assistant to the town manager in the admin department. Of these positions, the accounting technician and the part-time admin position will be funded fully by the ARPA program. We will now be reviewing issues to monitor and consider longer term. Under our revenue, this coming summer, we will be performing an in-house nexus study under the general plan maintenance fee and technology fee to capture revenue under those items. We expect an additional 1% in UUT for fiscal year 2023. Oh, apologies, that should be 2023 and 24. Along with our fees, another fee under development is the construction impact fee that would support additional code enforcement at construction sites, road repair on streets affected by construction, and garbage collection along the town's right-of-way. Under our excess ERAF and VLF, there will be an impact on revenue. Again, excess ERAF is the Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund. VLF is the Vehicle License Fee. These are all categories we have listed under revenue for property taxes. The county has been providing us with updates. At the end of May, the county notified us that the state's planned fix for the shortfall under the vehicle license fee would be to use excess ERAF funds and divert them to offset the shortfall for the VLF. Therefore, a cap would be placed on ERAF revenue for fiscal year 22-23 at the fiscal year 21-22 distribution totals. The current budget proposed reflects the May update from San Mateo County. We received a new update just last week that legislation recommended that the proposed trailer bill be rejected and that the backfill for VLF for fiscal year 19-20 be approved. While this is good news for fiscal year 19-20, it does not take care of the shortfall for fiscal year 2021 or fiscal year 21-22. This revenue line item will be adjusted to reflect the most recent update received by the county in the budget presentation scheduled for the public hearing on June 22nd. Additional revenue expected under the approved shortfall for fiscal year 1920 would be an additional $10,536. Under our a few expenditure items, an item you may have heard us mention in recent budget presentations is our aging facilities and the increased costs in maintenance and repairs. Also, a new item that we will be discussing further is our library donor funds. An adjustment to library donor funds once received from San Mateo County Library System will no longer be received. The town holds funds specifically for the purpose of library maintenance and utilities. While there are sufficient funds projected for fiscal year 2022 and 23, there may be a significant impact to general fund in future budget years. Continued issues to monitor and consider. Under our wildfire support, we have an increase in the fire mitigation program of $73,000. This will cover approximately 6-person crew plus a fire engineer that provides oversight. Continued right-of-way vegetation management. And this is also supported by the gas tax fund. Microgrid initial study and design. This will be listed under the ARPA plan, as well as continued expenditures for the safety element update. And another item listed under the ARPA program to enhance broadcast capabilities to the AM radio. An additional item to take a deeper dive on is open space maintenance. We have seen some increase in maintenance costs and expenditures for the use of our open space area. For the first time included in this budget, funds will be appropriated from open space for the purpose of maintenance on town-owned open space properties. Through the utility users tax, 2% of the total tax collected goes to the open space fund as revenue. For fiscal year 2022-23, we are projecting this revenue to be approximately $355,000, of which $112,600 is budgeted for maintenance on the open space properties listed here under the capital program. For our first line item, continued vegetation management at the Springdown and Blue Heron Pond location. This includes mowing and weed control over the site. A contractor crew comes out to the site approximately 8 times a year. The native grass and flower seeding is maintained as required. Under line item 2 for Ford Field open space, this includes additional mowing related to efforts around invasive weed control. Item number 3 for Frog Pond open space, continued weeding and vegetation maintenance as suggested by the Conservation Committee. Item number 4, Town Center, to cover maintenance costs for added native landscaping features, also as requested by Conservation. And item number 5, biologist consultant services. This is to provide on-call advice to the Conservation Committee on all open space locations as needed, related to invasive weed control and wildlife information. An additional item to review is the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. We recently completed the initial report, which is due April 30th. We expect to receive the second disbursement in July in the new fiscal year. We will continue to review projects to maximize the use of these funds. And most recently, under the final rule, there were some changes made to the expenditures that can qualify for funding under the ARPA plan. These items include responses to negative economic impacts of public health emergency, responses to disproportionate public health and economic impacts of the pandemic, capital expenditures to respond to the public health and negative economic impacts, responses to restore and bolster government employment, government services to the extent of revenue loss, investments in broadband infrastructure, and investments in water and sewer infrastructure. In our next slide here, I have a list of the planned projects for the upcoming fiscal year 2022-23. We have a few items that are overall mainly under the capital improvement program, which include the microgrid initial study and design. Also some expenditures in software and licensing, upgrading and converting software to the cloud. Also upgrading our phone system, as well as the setting up the hybrid Zoom room in the community hall building in order to support larger audiences for council meetings. We also have as well the radio antenna to enhance the broadcast capabilities, as well as staffing support for the new positions that we will be adding, including the finance accounting technician. And then also some support in the finance department for regular staffing costs to administer the ARPA program. Here we have a list of items to be adjusted and will be reflected in the June 22nd version of the budget. We have recognized that the new position for development plan review technician positions should be split between both the planning and building department. So that will be adjusted. Currently, it's listed under just the planning department. I will also be including the list we just reviewed for the ARPA items. I will include a new section in the budget book, which outlines what these expenditures will be. And additionally, there is a line item listed under the Public Works Department for miscellaneous consultants. That line item should actually be reflected under software and licensing, so that correction will also be made. Coming up in the near future, we will have the public hearing scheduled for June 22nd. And then in the fall, we will be going through the second time. Last year was the first time we presented a September revision of the budget. Our September revision allows us to present our actuals that would be reflecting true actuals through the end of the fiscal year. It will also provide us with additional information that we may not have had to date in order to include in this proposed budget. So the September revision allows us the ability to true up these numbers. I have come to the end of my presentation, so I'll open it up for any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Are there any council questions for Cindy? I'd like to go first. Anybody? Marianne.
Regarding the expenses for open space maintenance, I recall a figure of $100,000 pledged to maintain the frog pond when we chose to designate it as open space. How much of that $100,000 have we collected?
We've received one pledge. I don't know, Cindy, if you recall it off the top of your head, how much that is. I do believe that they were, the process had started through resident action and then was temporarily suspended as the housing element conversation was ongoing. I would anticipate it picking back up.
Okay. And then this is a overarching large question. I mean, for all the reasons Cindy cited, as well as the trends that this community has an increasing demand for services, there are lawsuits. We have 2 right now as a way for the community to express their extreme unhappiness with us. Are you thinking about looking for alternate funding streams in the future?
Yes, and Cindy, please jump in if you've got some additional comments. So part of the work will happen this summer. We're considering 3 potential revenue streams that will provide, some won't be a significant amount, but the construction impact fee could be a considerable amount. So to list those again, construction impact fee, general plan maintenance fee, and a technology fee. We're looking at other potential sources, nothing to report on right now. This is one of the hardest things in government, is to find new revenue streams. It tends to be easier in larger cities, frankly. You have an opportunity around hotel taxes, sales taxes that are much larger and the like. So we're going to continue to look. We do believe that, at least as it relates to the deficit this year, that much of what we're working with will be ameliorated next year through what I just described, and also the reset of the UUT, as Cindy mentioned.
Okay, what is
An ongoing process.
What does reset of the UUT mean?
The UUT was initially voted on by residents at 5.5%. It's been subsequently lowered through voter action to 4.5%, and next year, without a measure, it would reset to 5%, 5.5%.
Okay, right, thanks. I was actually on the council when we lowered it. I remember that. It was a very long time ago.
It's also worth noting that this won't be necessarily initially directly supporting town services, but there have been some conversations between the Woodside Fire Protection District, the town of Woodside, the town of Portola Valley in the county, on a potential parcel tax to support wildfire mitigation measures. That will be led by the district, as it would be at the district level. So I would anticipate early next year providing some information based on what I believe is going to be a feasibility study that the district will have with consultants over the next 6 months or so. So theoretically, some of those funds could be used directly by the town for a variety of the efforts that we're doing now, or others, but that hasn't been determined.
Okay, so this is a parcel tax, excuse me, that is different from the one that is currently being proposed by One Shoreline for sea level rise, stormwater, and wildfire resiliency. This is a different one.
It's unrelated to that.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more thing to add on. Howard and I are working on a potential fee study to look at the building division fees and the engineering division fees. So that would improve cost recovery in both of those divisions as well.
Thank you, Laura.
Is that it, Marianne?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Who's
yes.
next? Sarah?
I feel like through the finance committee, and I spent some time with Cindy, so I don't have any questions.
Okay. They accidentally hit the wrong button there. Okay, I have a couple questions, John, if you and Jeff don't. Any questions, Jeff, John?
I don't have any questions right now, no.
We don't either.
They're just very quick ones, because I've also spent a good amount of time with Cindy and at the finance committee digging into this and understanding it. They're both related to ARPA expenditures. One is that you had 160K for the Zoom rooms in the budget. I thought, have we not paid the bill for that yet or something? I mean, we're sitting here in this Zoom room using the equipment that's been installed. Is there another 160K or is it 160K that we just haven't paid yet?
160,000 is the estimated amount to set up the community hall Zoom room.
Oh, the community hall. Got
Yes,
it. Got it. So not the schoolhouse.
not the schoolhouse. That has already been spent.
Okay. And then the second thing is that I congratulate you on being creative and trying to draw as much as we can, or get reimbursement from ARPA for as much as we're eligible to under ARPA's rules. I noticed that you have 3% of finance department salaries for administering the ARPA program. Are you allowed to also get reimbursed for 3% of the benefits for the finance department?
So I have calculated 3% of salaries and benefits. So benefits are included with the exception of any pension contributions.
Got it.
So it does
Okay.
not include anything for PERS.
Great. Okay. I was just hoping maybe we could squeeze a couple more cents out of them, but it sounds like you already did.
I tried.
Well, and if I can piggyback on your questions and the comments from or answers from Cindy, the two positions that we've added using the ARPA funds, we view them primarily as catch-up positions for the next year, given the challenges that we've had in completing some of the staff work. We will review over the course of next year whether those should be permanently added positions. One of the current thinkings that Melvin and I have is that the assistant to the town manager position that, and this would be Brandy, who would continue with us, which is wonderful, could be theoretically converted into some sort of management analyst position that would rove across departments. But this is early days in that conversation. But certainly Cindy's department could use some additional resource to catch up on a variety of activity.
Okay, great. Thank you. And if there are no more council questions, I will then go to public comment. And I see there's a hand up in Zoom land and there's one here in person. So I'll start with David Cardinal in Zoom land, and Judy, you'll be next.
Sure. I think, first of all, I think the budget, I think sounds great. As a resident, I'd love to see us support the town more. I mean, we, the residents, want a lot in terms of fuel mitigation and everything else. And I don't know how we pay up for that, but I think we should. And especially all the people who seem to have a lot of time to ask for a lot more from the town, whether it's lawyers' fees or whatever. I mean, I think we need to make that right. So whatever fee structure or tax structure, all for making sure we as a wealthy community can afford to row our own boat, as they say. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Judy, can you come to the podium, please? Yeah.
So excited to see you, Judy.
Let me just check. Can everybody hear Judy? I know
No.
we had trouble with the mic last time.
No,
Can you tap the mic? Is it on? Hang on a second.
Testing, testing. Yeah, sounds like it.
there you go.
There you go.
Thanks. So speaking for the Conservation Committee, first, I want to thank you for adding the public works staff position. We've been advocating for that for a couple of years. I'm delighted that Howard's going to have a little more help. And we appreciate the funding of the open space and town center recommendations for maintenance and improvements. And I hope you've enjoyed the poppies that are at Springdown, which is a payoff for the money we've been spending in the past. However, as a resident and looking at the long view here, I'm a little dismayed that these funds are coming from OSAC, especially since this is counter to the Open Space Acquisition Committee detailed guidelines of appropriate use of the funds that was done in 2007 and the council's approval of those guidelines. And also the Finance Committee's February 2018 dedicated to open space acquisition was their quote. So there's been this sense that it wasn't the acquisition committee as it's named. And I know that there is, Kara has said it's legal to do this. I'm sure it is. I'm not disputing the legality of it so much as the spirit of what residents thought they were voting for when they passed those taxes and what traditionally it has been in the past. Even more so because the decision seems to have been made sort of unilaterally by staff without consulting or even informing OSAC. And that concerns me probably more than where the funds actually come from. A small detail is town center is not an official open space. It's in there and you're using open space funds, but town center is town center. It was purchased not by open space funds back when the town was first funded. My concern is if these funds are used for ongoing maintenance, that we can say goodbye to ever again acquiring more open space because already the costs are sort of outrunning the growth of that fund. And I just don't see that we would ever get back the ability to get open space if we are drawing down those funds. But as I say, my main concern is sort of how the process happened here. A lot of us who serve on committees do it because we think we're making a contribution, and to have to not be part of the process is very discouraging. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Can
Jeremy,
I
see your
ask
hand.
a quick question of staff?
Yeah.
How much money do we have in the open space fund?
The city, we're anticipating about 7.9 million at the end of
7.9 million. And you're proposing 112,000 this year? Okay.
And that's approximately half or a little less than half of the UUT that's expected to come in.
Correct.
And through the chair, just to address a few of Judy's comments. So first of all, I alerted the chair of the Open Space Acquisition Committee in an email on April 12th of my intent. Certainly the purpose of that was to allow time for the committee to meet should they wish to. So staff did reach out. If there's any questions about whether or not it's an appropriate use, so just a few items. In 2019, the town council, September 2019, reviewed an open space maintenance funding item and to provide a few pieces of commentary. In 2005, the then attorney Sloan, quote, confirmed that the 2% UUT money could be used for purchasing, leasing, or maintenance of open space. And our current town attorney, Cara Silver, is also reviewed that and shared those conclusions. When the council approved a statement concerning expenditures restrictions, a statement concerning expenditure restrictions for revenues collected from the utilities user tax in 2005, in response to an effort that was to oppose the ballot measure, the statement to the community said, quote, revenues received under 2% UUT utility users tax will be exclusively appropriated and expended for the open space acquisition fund, which is defined in the budget as used for acquisition and support of open space parcels in town. I would also note that the fund does get sources from a couple different places. It gets it from the 2% UUT. It gets it from those who make a donation to the town, which happens occasionally. We do receive money from any subdivisions that occur in town through parks and a little bit of interest. So in order to be completely transparent, what I would like to propose tonight is twofold. One, by virtue of the council approving or recommending the budget moving forward, that I bring back an item that would amend the policy as described, that we would also have specific subsections in the budget that bifurcate these different amounts. So it's clear that a donation or interest or anything from this subdivision parks would not be included in this way. Carter, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. We did review the 2019 staff report on this topic, and the council did have considerable conversation about it back in 2019. And I continue to believe that the portion of the UUT that is collected for open space is properly, can be expended on maintenance. And as Judy mentioned, it's a policy issue though for the council. Jeremy mentioned two other funds that, or revenue sources that are also currently captured under that open space fund. One is for subdivisions that do not provide parks on site, and so they pay for an open space or park acquisition fee. Those fees cannot be used for maintenance. Those fees must be used for acquisition. And also the donation funds that come in, generally those donations specify that they should be used for acquisition. It's unusual that somebody would donate some money to be used for maintenance. And so again, that the donation of restrictions will depend on the actual bequest and the intentions there. So I support Jeremy's recommendation to really segregate these three different pots of funds and clearly indicate what the three can be used for, because there are going to be some distinctions between the allowed uses for these three funds.
Through the chair, I would also note that in my correspondence with the chair of the committee, I noted that the staff's intention was to never spend more than was brought in the fund. And that in fact, I expected the amount in any given year to be around $100,000, notwithstanding any new items that were requested by committee or added by council. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more hand. Oh, a hand has gone up. Mary Huffy. Go ahead, Mary.
I feel ill-equipped to comment on the budget for a number of reasons, but one is I didn't see a place where you were comparing, as I'm used to with looking at budgets, the 2 years back. Did I just miss that? Is that in our minutes, in your agenda somewhere, where you show? And I guess I had the nerve to speak up because Judy's question did interest me, and as did Jeremy's response, in that I remember these conversations extremely well about how we use the acquisition fund. And I thought this had been resolved in a different fashion. I just wondered whether it happened last year or not in the same way. And how many years we've been doing it this way. Just, I don't recall. So I think it does help a lot when people look at a budget to be able to see the 2 years, at least, together.
May I, Mayor Hughes?
Yes, I was just going to respond that there are in fact two prior years are there, both the adopted budgets and
On the minutes. Okay.
they're in the budget packet.
Okay. On the agenda.
Budget,
In the budget. Yep.
in the budget document.
Yep. Do you have a further comment, Jeremy?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. I see Christy Corley hand is up. Go ahead,
Yes,
Christy.
thank you for taking my question. First of all, in the Blue Sky timer, we're not seeing how many people are attending this meeting. And as the public, we really appreciate that. If you can add that and let us know how many people are attending. It's usually, and then my second question is, you mentioned utilities studies, sewer, water. I didn't hear anything about undergrounding PG&E or looking into our Wi-Fi situation with planning and building increasing in the next 8 years. So I have a question about what those studies would cost and if we're planning any of those studies. And I have a question about we as the public look forward to getting quarterly reports. I think you've mentioned that in the past, but we have not seen it and we would like quarterly reports. I didn't hear anything about the audit, and if you could update us on the audit. And in the finance meeting, we asked about the employee investment, retirement funds and how the stock market has affected those funds since we fully paid those funds. So if you could comment on all those. And I'm curious about the conservation biologist, what the plans are for the $6,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Next hand I see raised is Dana. Whoops.
I
Dana just
no longer see Dana's hand
finished. Yep,
raised.
she lowered her hand. So let's go to Betsy.
Good evening, council members and staff. I just wanted to broadly weigh in support of Judy Murphy's previous comments, both as conservation chair and as private citizen. Broadly speaking, and I'm speaking now to the OSAC funds. This was an issue that was put before the voters more than once and passed with a majority vote, with language that was interpreted by the committee itself with specific guidelines for the interpretation of that acquisition and projects comment in the voting materials. So I think in the spirit of what we're trying to do here, to hew close to the voters' will, is something that I value greatly, and I think this should go back to the voters for further information before we abrogate from that direction. That's my personal view. My request, though, is if Kara Silver would be willing to address the expenditure of maintenance money on town center maintenance, since it is not an open space property. So I would think that that would lie well outside what was allowed.
Thank you, Betsy.
Legally, I'm talking about.
Thank you, Betsy.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Next hand is Nona.
Can
Go
you
ahead.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm speaking for myself, but I am a member of the Open Space Acquisition Advisory Committee and the Conservation Committee. I too am concerned about the use of the funds from the utility users tax to cover maintenance costs on open space parcels and the town center. I would like to underscore the reasons that Judy gave and add to them about why this would be counterproductive to the stewardship of the town's open spaces and to values that are cherished in Portola Valley. Reason one, the Open Space Fund guidelines specifically prohibit using the fund for maintenance to restore attributes that the property possessed during the town's ownership. Those guidelines were approved by a 4-0 vote of the town council in March of 2017. Using the UUT for maintenance is a diversion of funds from the Open Space Fund and therefore is tantamount to using them for a prohibited purpose. Reason two, OSAC and conservation have an active partnership that balances the broader opportunities and costs of acquiring open space against the ongoing and evolving needs
for staying open spaces over time. Diverting funds from the open space fund to cover maintenance costs identified by conservation pits long-term vision against short-term management and damages the critical partnership between OSAC and conservation. Reason 3, it has been argued that safeguarding the open space fund is fiscally unsound because the growth in the open space fund is not keeping up with the cost of real estate. This thinking fails to recognize that given the abundance of open space in Portola Valley, the real lifeblood of our open space is linkage and the protection of corridors between larger parcels. Conservation easements and small parcels, often in unbuildable locations, can stitch together existing open spaces and amplify their value at costs that may be well within the capacity of the open space fund. Reason 4, people contribute their time, their money, and their hearts to efforts that they believe in and can trust to adhere to principles and practices that go beyond what is strictly legal. If using the UUT for maintenance is perceived as a breach of faith, as it seems to be, the losses will surely outweigh any short-term gains. I truly appreciate that the proposed budget reflects a lot of hard work, careful thought, and difficult choices by many people. But I urge the council to reject using the UUT for purposes that are outside the open space fund guidelines and to instead engage with the two most deeply invested committees in finding an alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Nona. And I see Dana's hand had popped up again and it's gone down again. Dana, if you would like to speak, raise your hand now. There we go. Go ahead, Dana.
Mute. Hi.
Hello.
Okay. I mean, Nona just pretty much said it all. But I wanted to say that when I heard about this, I wrote to the Open Space Acquisition Committee immediately, and I heard back from Terry, the chair, and Jeremy may have notified him in April, but he said, we just learned about the budget proposal as well. We were not consulted and are looking into it. We do understand the town consulted with council and feels it is permissible, but we are not aware of why now there is a desire to pursue. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, I see no more hands raised. Oh, nope, there goes one. Lucy. Go ahead, Lucy.
Hey there, thanks. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath. I just had to run. Yeah, so I'm just speaking for myself also, but I am on the finance committee and I am an individual who thinks about how we tend to our landscapes, like how to care for land every day. It's kind of my job. And first, I just wanted to say great work to Jeremy and Cindy. Very appreciative of their work. I think there's a lot of variables and a lot of changes happening, and this is a challenging budget to manage, and it's going to continue to be a little challenging. So just want to say I appreciate their work and enjoy working with them. And then in regards to the open space funds, I understand why there's debate about it. I understand why there's concern about it from members of the public. And I also understand why staff would have made that decision. I think the budget is challenging to balance right now. And I think that expenditures I think we've been coming from an ethos time where we necessarily need to and are starting to inhabit an ethos of care and maintenance. And requests from both the Conservation Committee and for things like fuel load reduction have been increasing without commensurate increases to revenue to support those. So, staff could have made the decision, I think, probably to just say, well, we can't fund any of these Conservation Committee requests. We're going to let Spring Down become overgrown and full of noxious weeds, and same with the creek at the town center. So yeah, I think in the coming year or two, it would be really good to think about where the funding is going to come from for this very important work. Like I said, I think we're moving from an ethos of acquisition into an ethos of care, and that it would be good to change our funding flow to reflect that and do this work that I think the residents of the town want to happen. They want fuel load reduction to have their open spaces to be cared for. And I think the voters would support that because, like I said, I think we're in a paradigm shift there. So thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay, I now see no more hands raised from the public. So I'll bring it back to the council. There were a number of questions raised there. I don't know if staff would like to address any of them or take them up offline. I'm sure there will be on the main question that we've heard from a number of speakers tonight. I'm sure council will have some opinions too, so you may want to take part in that conversation, as we no doubt will be having it. Is there anything you'd like to, any of the questions that were raised that you'd like to address though?
The majority were related to the open space. So I think that, as you said, that conversation will continue. I think the vast majority of questions from Christy, they seem appropriate to be offline. So Christy, feel free to send me an email and I'm happy to answer those.
Okay.
Unless there was unless there was something that council wanted me to specifically.
No, I think Christie's were the ones that I think that. So, thank you. Okay, so I'll bring it back to council then for discussion. Would anybody like to go first with their thoughts on the budget, on open space fund, et cetera? John, go ahead.
Yeah, I do recall our discussion back, I guess it was in 3 or 4 years ago, where we did touch on the subject. I don't remember exactly how much detail we got into, but if someone would have that information in hand and could, I know it's already been slightly discussed to some extent tonight. If we could refresh my memory on that a little bit, that would be appreciated. So what the actual decision, if any, that was voted on by the council and what it actually said.
Yeah, in 2019, the council did approve use of the funds to bring a property up to a level of maintenance. But we hadn't subsequently been able to bring that back to the committee before the pandemic. So while the policy hasn't been written, that the direction is clear. What we're recommending tonight as part of this is that you direct me to come back with a further revision to allow what we're proposing. We think it's consistent with what we've described.
Right. I want to go on and say that I do appreciate concern and expressed on both sides. Certainly, we have issues with potentially really constrained budgets in the coming years, and our search for additional revenue will be fruitful and won't be a real problem coming up in the next decade or so. But I can see that it's certainly a possibility that we're not going to have an easy go of finding ways to supplement our income, our revenues. So we have to be careful of how we spend, obviously. And given that, I would like to see this issue come back at least to the council for discussion of potential policy revisions or clarification at some future date. Yeah, that's all for now.
Jeremy, if I might ask a question, what potential alternatives might there be? You've presented what you think is sort of staff's best idea here. I can think of a couple alternatives. One is we increase our deficit by $112,000 or whatever it is.
Correct.
Another one would be we don't do the work, or we don't do some of the work, or something like that. Are there other alternatives that you can think of? And actually, there's a part two to that question as well, which is if we were to just increase our deficit this year, do the work, while we take the time to have a discussion about should we be taking some funds, some portion of the incoming UUT, say, could we then essentially retroactively make ourselves whole? If we had that discussion and the community consensus or agreement was that, yes, okay, we understand why, and people fall along the lines of what Lucy was saying we need to do this work, we need to have a paradigm shift, the council agrees, the committees agree, whatever we end up doing, that we might, retroactively be able to fill that later. Is that an option, or is it really, as you were saying, you don't want to sort of carry things over from one year to the next?
Yeah, thank you. If I can take that backwards, within any budget year, we have the opportunity to move funds around. Once we're closed out of the budget year, we can't really retroactively do anything about that. We could probably come up with a way to budget more money coming into the coffers in a future year to support previous expenditures, but staff would have to sit down, and I want to sit down with Carr to see how that would all sort of play out. That is highly unusual. I'm not aware of anyone who does that way. From a funding perspective, I think you outlined the suite of challenging choices, and it was a similar sort of conversation internally, is just related to what do we want to propose here. Given the past comments by the town attorney and what's been presented to the public in the past about the use of the funds, we thought it was appropriate at least to bring forward a budget that included that. There's certainly no issue whatsoever with, over the course of the summer, even past the September revision, having a higher deficit budget and having a conversation. I do believe the committees will be, continue to be clear about particularly open space acquisition as it relates to the use of the funds. I do recall two spirited conversations over the last 6 years that I've participated in. I'm sure there have been others around this issue, including one that was about whether the committee was appropriately named. I recall that one. I don't have a smart answer for you because it's a challenge. But given what we understand to be the appropriate use of the funds and the limited use of the funds, we thought that this made a lot of sense to at least propose.
Yeah, I mean, my personal feeling is I think it's something like this is probably inevitable, because it's not like we're going to do this maintenance this year and then we're done, and we're never going to be facing this problem again. If we carry a slightly larger deficit this year, that'll happen next year and the year after and the year after and the year after and the year after, and it's unsustainable. So one way or another, we need to figure out, assuming that we want this work to be done, which I think everybody is probably in favor of having it done, how we're going to fund it, given that there aren't necessarily, maybe we can find some other funding source quickly. But I think we need to potentially have that conversation. But it sounds like what you're saying is we could potentially adjust the budget as proposed here to just run a bigger deficit, have the conversation. If we can have the conversation quickly, then we could amend it in September to come out however that conversation resolves.
Yeah.
Is it anybody
Well,
else?
I have a question. I'm wondering if you can, Cindy, if you could screen share and put up that open space line items. I think that would be, at least for me, helpful. And I guess another question I have, it's hard to say I'm new, it's been a little bit longer, but I haven't been around for a lot of the UUT conversations. And I guess I didn't realize that that 4.5%, there were portions of it that were restricted to certain uses. Is that, what's the quick overview of how that works?
The quick overview is there are two portions of the UT. There's 2% that goes to open space.
Okay.
And there's a separate, originally 5.5%, but it's been lowered to 4.5% for general fund. So the 2%, it's separate from the 4.5.
I did not realize. Okay, that helps a lot. I thought it was 2% of the 4.5%. Okay. Makes sense now. And I guess the other question was looking at this is the entire 112 a concern, or there obviously parts of these, are any parts of these not a concern, or is it the whole thing that, to your point, Craig, would we deficit spend to cover some of this? Are there some parts that are not disputed on this list?
Well, my understanding from the comments I heard tonight is that a penny would be disputed, that it's a fundamental question of should we be spending any of this money on maintenance?
Mhm.
I think there are some, after we answer, should we even spend a penny? There's a second question maybe about town center and whether that counts. What
Gotcha.
is open space? But I
Yeah.
think the first question really is, should any money be going to maintenance?
I guess what sounded interesting to me is to get more information, segregating based on sources of the revenue. I would definitely like to see that information to clarify further. And it does sound like there needs some refinement of the policy. And I guess the question is, in the meantime, the only option is to deficit spend or cut certain things out. I totally agree. Deficit spending would be an absolute Band-Aid because these are recurring and increasing. So that's why I think there needs to be a clarification on the policy side.
Mm-hmm. Marianne? Jeff?
I guess, that's just really on open space, which is, $100,000 out of an $8 million budget. So just in general, I would say, I'm comfortable with the deficit spending that's planned for this year. I think it's for really important things like staffing and fire mitigation and the housing and the safety element. So I'm definitely comfortable with that. And just a nit on format. I also, as you know, Cindy, love to see you year over year. And if it's possible, for instance, it's nice to see the actualized 2018, 2019, the actualized 19, 20. I know you only have so many columns you can put in that format, but perhaps once we get into the September revision phase where it becomes kind of a locked in budget, we can have as many actualized years as possible. I think it's helpful to understand year over year. Another question I had is, and I don't want to put you on the spot, and I realize you don't have a crystal ball and we still have 3 months left, Cindy. Do you have a sense if this current year is going to come in with a surplus similar to the 2 previous years? Or do you just not know yet?
Don't have a definite answer yet, but I do feel that it would come in as previous years where there has been more significant revenues than expenditures.
Okay, so which is another reason why the deficit spending this year, because that would make 3 years in a row of surplus. Okay. And I think it's just echoing, the need to find revenue. You guys have heard me say that in a lot of different meetings, but I don't know how what the next step there, but it doesn't seem like fees are going to get us there given what's coming down the hill. So that's just more of a broader discussion to think about. That's it for me.
Okay. Marianne?
I do recall the conversations about the open space acquisition funds and whether they should be spent for maintenance of our properties or just open space acquisition. And in the past, I think we've always fallen on the side, got to keep these for open space acquisition. But, things are changing. We have, in the past, we didn't even keep up with the maintenance. And I remember conservation coming every year and begging for money. And I remember actually advocating for them. And, sometimes we do part of what they asked for or a little more than part of it. But I think we can all agree that we now have to do that maintenance for wildfire preparation and safety. We don't have a choice anymore. And, we didn't used to even keep up the frog pond, and now we have to. So something's got to give. We have to do the work. Either we take it out of the open space acquisition fund, at least right now, and then have a really robust conversation about what the policy is going to be going forward, or we run a bigger deficit, which is just kicking the can down the road. There really aren't any good choices here.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Mary Ann said it well on the, well, stepping back. First of all, Cindy, Jeremy, Jim, everyone who worked on this, the budget does look great. Thanks for all the good work you guys put on this. Good job. I share Sarah's sort of bigger long-term concern, which is what we're going to add for revenues down the line, because we're obviously, everything is getting more expensive, and we are not, we don't have any simple levers to push to increase revenue concomitantly. So we do need to think about that, and obviously I know we're going to hear a lot more about that. And specifically on this open space question, I think I agree with Mary Ann that we have to do the work, we have to pay for it, we have to find a mechanism for it. If we don't use the open space funding from the UU, specifically the funding from the UUT, because not all of the open space funding is from UUT, but if we don't use that funding, it has to come from somewhere else. Sooner or later, there's something else we can't do. I think it's a reasonable use of the UUT portion of the open space fund. Personally, I'm happy to sort of make sure that we dot the I's and cross the T's and go through the process to make sure we have a coherent policy on it. But my 2 cents is we have to pay, we have to do the work, we have to pay for it. And the UUT portion, which is relatively, just only part of what's feeding the open space fund, is a reasonable place to take that money from. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Jeff.
Can I make one other comment? I want to make sure I'm reading this right. Cindy, this is on the fund activity summary where the open space is listed here. Is it correct that this fund generated or is anticipated is the estimated revenues, that's investment revenue, the 437,000?
So the estimated revenues is including the sort of the different pots that Jeremy mentioned. So that includes the UUT, the 2%. It includes some investment revenue. It also includes projected contribution amounts.
Okay, so it's all of those. Okay.
All of those items.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I tend to agree that I think where we will end up landing out on this after we've had the discussion is almost certainly going to be that we need to consider taking some portion in any given year of the incoming UUT and using it for maintenance when that maintenance is necessary. I am sympathetic to people who thought they were voting it for one reason rather than another, but the text of the thing is less than a page long. It's very easy to read, and it clearly says maintenance in it. That is what I read when I voted for it. So, I think we need to come up with a reasonable amendment to the policy, and I think that may take a little bit of time to understand, where do we want to set the limit? What kinds of uses are appropriate? Should town center be covered or not? Things like that I think we need to, it would be good to iron out the details of and get some agreement on. And I think that, the concept Jeremy suggested of, we could optionally deficit spend for now in the budget. Most of these expenditures are probably not going to happen between now and September. And so then we, in the September adjustment, we'll have had time to have that conversation to think through what we're doing and to set this up, not just for this year's budget, but for the longer term as well. Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put fuel on the fire here, but I do want to make sure that the record is abundantly clear. In review of the 2009 ballot measure R, the rebuttal to arguments against the 2% UUT said proceeds from the 2% utility users tax for open space are applied to the town's restricted open space fund are used solely for open space acquisition and maintenance. So the language seems clear. Now that doesn't take away, I don't want anyone to think that town staff took any of this lightly, because open space is clearly a cornerstone of the ethos of this community. So want to extend my thoughts on that one to those who may have a different opinion on that level. Just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other comments from council or discussion from council members on the other elements of the budget? I know Sarah had a couple, but we've been sort of primarily focused on this element that's approximately 1% of the budget. Are there any other comments or discussion on the rest of the budget? I don't see any of my colleagues raising their hands, but I thought, oh, Jeremy, you have something? You're on mute.
I had some concluding remarks, but if you would just.
Oh, yeah, I just
ready.
want to, I don't have a whole lot of discussion or comments. I spent some time on this at the Finance Committee and subsequently discussing some things that I'd found and questions I needed to dig into with Cindy. So I'm very comfortable with the budget overall. I also, as I had done in previous years, I took some of the data on the budget, and my screen is taking its time and trying to share here. Let me try that again. Whoops, oh, it just appeared just as I dismissed it. So. There we go. This is tiny text when I share it like this because there's so much information in here. But taking the numbers from the budget, I like to, one, go through it and extract all of these numbers and digest them because it helps me understand what's going on. But secondly, I use this as a way to just kind of visualize the relative size of different elements of our budget and to be able to see, to be able to have a clearer sense in my head when staff discusses things like, oh, maybe VLF is going to go away because the state is going to not pay us the money they owe us. What is the impact of that relative to the overall budget? And you can see by looking at this that VLF is kind of one tiny portion of this big blue property taxes bar over on the left. And so it is an important element. And it's roughly the same size as, for example, all of our fire safety spending. But it's in terms of the overall total budget, it gives you a sense of scale of where things are. You can see what the ARPA contribution is. I've highlighted that in this red element on the left. You can see what elements are coming from taxes and what's called intergovernmental revenue, which is basically other taxes. And you can see what's charges for services where we're charging people for things that they're directly getting. You can see what's coming from utility taxes, franchise fees. When we're drawing on fund balances, you can see that when we're adding to reserves, you can see that over on the other side. So I'll make this available. I've actually already posted it online, but I will distribute through the digest next week a URL to share this with the public. I've done this with previous budgets as well, and those previous years' budgets are still on the same site. So it's nice to be able to go through year by year and kind of compare and see how things are changing and what the relative sizes are. So I just wanted to share that and let people know that if they'd like to see this in more detail, that will be in next week's digest. Okay, with that, is there any other comments buried by the council? Yes, Jeremy.
Just to, thank you before we move on. I think putting some of this in context is important. Next year feels, at least for the staff, to be something of a transitional year with the recognition that the work continues to grow and become more complicated. And we're appreciative of the if the budget is ultimately approved, the addition of the staff will I think continue to be able to provide excellent service to the public. But we don't take any of this lightly at all. But we think it's a reflection of the reality of the public that we're serving and their needs. And so we think this is an appropriate draft recommendation to you. And just a big thank you to Cindy, to Jim, to Nicole, to the department heads, to everybody who participated in the process of developing this. It's one of the things that we really enjoy doing. We love the challenge. We love making it work, and we appreciate it bringing it to you tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. And yes, I'd like to repeat that thanks to for Cindy and Jim and the work that you've done, and Jeremy and all of the managers. As I've gone through this process now a couple times with Cindy and previous financial managers before, things are just getting more and more clear. Things are becoming easier and easier to read and digest and understand. Staff's own familiarity as we've transitioned from finance director to finance director has, I think, improved. We've now finally settled in with OpenGov and have a clear understanding of how that works, and shaken out most of the bugs there. So I think that this product really shows all of that, and it's overall a very good package. So with that, I would entertain I guess is there even a motion here? It's really, I guess you would maybe want to hear what the consensus is, or what the overall opinion is on how to deal with this open space funding when it comes back on the 22nd.
Yeah, and well, yeah, if you could continue that conversation, I think I've got it. But if we could just clarify it a bit, it sounds like, I'll stop. Love to hear that.
I think there's no necessary formal action here, but is there a consensus or a majority agreement on the council that staff should bring it back as a deficit spend, and then we can have a conversation with the various committees, or would we prefer to bring it forward as is?
I think the deficit spend suggestion is fine for now.
I agree. If we need
Yeah,
to
I
do the
think
work.
that's spend is fine. I think what I was interested is seeing that breakdown, that analysis.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting piece of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Marianne?
Sure.
Okay. So is that sufficient direction for you guys?
That's great. Thank you. We look forward to coming back on the 22nd.
Okay, me too. All right, let's see, where does that bring us then? We are now at item 7, Council Liaison Committee and Regional Agency Reports. Marianne, you weren't here last time. Do you have a big pile to entertain us with this time?
Well, I decided that I would give you a break and only bring one from the previous period, and then the very few I have this time.
Sounds good.
So the only one I was going to bring from the previous period was I attended the Council of Cities meeting dinner in person in San Carlos. And the program was interesting. It was called Reimagining Main Street Strategies for a Thriving Downtown. And they had planners there talking about, it wasn't just about what they're doing in San Carlos, but examples of other, I guess, more suburban areas that had done mixed use downtowns with housing and retail and businesses and little parklets and town squares, you know, just that whole lovely walkable kind of community thing. But the thing I did want to mention was there was Carlos Romero, who is on several ABAG committees, mentioned that there are these REAP, Regional Early Action Planning Grant Funds, that have been available to local jurisdictions and to all the 109 members of ABAG. And not everybody has claimed theirs. And this was as of May 12th, we had not claimed ours. And so we have, according to this, $20,000 sitting on the table in REAP funds. And I sent the information to Jeremy and Laura. So I hope you chase this down to see if we can get an extra $20,000.
Yeah, it through the chair, it sounds like that might have just been something we hadn't signed somewhere along the way. We knew we were getting it, but we're working on it. Thank you for bringing it to our attention, Marianne.
Sure. And then there was a planning commission meeting on June 1st. They were looking at the, well, the first thing they were looking at was the preliminary review of an application for a CUP amendment to allow an increase in membership at Alpine, but they did not have a quorum. Two people were recused and one person wasn't there, so that had to be continued. So then they looked at the annual housing element progress report. And there were a lot of, so let me think of who was actually looking at it. Ann Copsill, Judith, and, and John and Nicholas. So I'm trying to remember what they were. It was a really long meeting, and of course I've blocked it from my mind. Well, she does she taught, she did the whole routine. This is what we did in calendar year 2021, the amount of building permits, et cetera. Talked about affiliated housing. Talked about that transitional supportive housing. Talked about the municipal code amendments for supportive and transitional housing to comply with state law. There was a lot of questions about, are the things we've heard before. Are the pipeline projects going to be included in the RENA? Is Ladera Church included in the RENA for our next housing element? Yes, yes, yes. Why couldn't we work together with our other fellows in other cities as we did in 2012? Because the other cities didn't wish to work together, the big ones. What about ADUs that are approved but not built? Is there a record? How many don't go forward? Well, actually most go forward. What counts for RENA? So there were a lot of those kind of questions. But the one, there were also questions about, or there was an update on some of the legislation that is pushing this Muni Code amendment for supportive and transitional housing to comply with state law. But I'm trying to think of what the interesting thing was. There was I'm going to skip ahead. So Laura talked about how they're going to look at the housing element, the draft housing element at the meeting next week. And it was scheduled for just one meeting. And one member of the Planning Commission felt very, very strongly that they could not possibly deal with it in just one meeting, and they needed more than one meeting. So that was a sort of split down the middle. Two people thought they could do it in one, two people thought they couldn't. And I believe there will be, from what I've heard, the meeting will start early. It will be divided into two parts. And then if they feel they haven't been able to do everything, they can do it on the 23rd, because I think they're going to continue the Alpine.
I think there's been an update to that. I don't know.
And there's even more of an update.
Well, Jeremy, maybe you can confirm, but my understanding there's going to be two meetings now.
So anyway, there was some concern that the housing element draft plan is so enormous and such a big thing, even though it has been fully vetted by the housing element committee, that they need more than one meeting. I personally feel they could do it in one meeting. And I think that staff has been trying very hard to make everyone happy. That is my report on that. I don't need an update on what's going on. And then there was a phone call today, a Zoom with Cal Water and Brandy and me and Jeremy and Melvin, because we wanted an update on what's going on with the AMI. That's the smart water meter pilot project. So apparently they have been working on installing some, but even though they've installed them, they haven't really turned them on or talked to the residents, because there have been a lot of bugs in the works and a lot of trial and error. And they said they've installed about 20. The problem is they don't have enough people to install them, but now they have a foreman, so they can keep the ball rolling, and they're still looking for 3 people. They're starting on Westridge and Alpine and going from east to west. They have run into some issues. They have to replace the meter box. It's all cellular, so it needs to communicate with the satellite. There will be an app you can use or the Cal Water portal so that you can see in real time how much water you're using, or if you have a leak. They will definitely let the customers know when they're going to be there, when they're actually going to install and turn them on. And we have to do some communication as well. This was an interesting anecdote. Dawn asked Southern California, because Southern California Cal Water's ahead. She said, how did you communicate to the customer? They said, we didn't, we just installed them. So we would prefer not to follow that model. What else? The other thing that came up, and this is pretty much because Jeremy asked, okay, we're in a drought. Are there things that we should be doing? And in the context of that conversation, Dawn revealed the fact that we will in fact be asked to restrict our water use. There will be mandatory water reduction, probably 25%. And it is not going to be based on the previous 2 years like it was before. It will probably be based on per capita, which will be really hard out here. So I was a little shocked when I heard this, and I guess stay tuned. But mandatory water restrictions are coming. And we can bring them to a council meeting. Oh, Jeremy also asked them to update us on all the things they're doing for wildfire prep, which I already knew they were doing a lot of those things. So that was a very illuminating meeting. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
Yes. I had last week airport roundtable met. The main thing we did was a sort of a status of the updated what's called the Surfer route, which is the sort of revised air route for arrivals from mostly Southern California. It seems to be working about the way it was intended to work, but there's a lot of sort of public discontent with it. People along the route, mostly outside of the roundtable's jurisdiction, are sort of often kind of complain about sort of the noises created over their houses. It's unfortunate. There's not a whole lot that Roundtable can do about it, but it's kind of every few years we review that route with the FAA. Other than that, Peninsula Clean Energy is reaching out to. We've basically formed a couple of advisory committees. One has to do with our efforts to be basically to be carbon free on a 24-hour-a-day basis, meaning that with the power we contract for, basically we will be providing all of our own power from carbon free sources at all hours of the day. So we will not be reliant on system brown power, even at 4 o'clock in the morning. And that's sort of no utility has ever actually done this. We would be the first. We are, I think, still on target to do it in 2025. It's technically complicated. We actually have a really good committee of sort of outside advisors working with us on it. We've had several publications. We'll have more publications around that. The other group is PCE, sort of committed to helping San Mateo County achieve its greenhouse gas free goal of being GHG free by 2035. We just had our first meeting with basically a second outside committee. I thought it was a really good discussion about that because it goes well beyond PCE. PCE is obviously going to provide carbon-free electricity for everyone, but then the question is, how can we put every possible use onto that carbon-free grid? Again, sort of a really interesting conversation. I think a lot of good work will be coming out of that.
Which county was that? Did you say San Mateo?
That's San Mateo County. It's Peninsula Clean Energy. So it's us in our county. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Although we now have Los Banos as a member. So we're obviously for that particular thing. It's interesting. The addition of Los Banos is sort of creates both challenges and interesting opportunities, but that's a longer conversation. Other than that, I don't think I actually had any meetings in town the last 2 weeks. Our last ad hoc housing element committee was just before our last council meeting. So we have one coming up on June 20th. So that's all I have.
John?
Yeah, all I had was the last emergency preparedness meeting. It was primarily a presentation by Peer and Peers, sorry, of the evacuation study, and it was pretty well attended. A lot of questions. I think the biggest takeaway for me was, since this is such what kind of groundbreaking work that's being done, there are so few of these studies that have been done, at least in the West, the US, that no one really knows exactly what the best what the outcome means in some ways. You get a number of hours it takes to evacuate the town, and you don't know if that's really great, because there are millions and millions of different possible scenarios that that might change things so dramatically that it would be very difficult to evaluate. So it was an interesting meeting and discussion. I think it'll be it's coming to us pretty soon, and it'll be. I think we're really fortunate to have this opportunity to be on the cutting edge of things and see what we can make of it. That was all I had.
Okay, thanks, John. Sarah?
Yeah, the only thing I have to add on the housing element is just that I'm sure everybody saw in their mailboxes that the draft housing element was published this afternoon, and that starts the public review process. So just encourage everybody to review that, and public comments closed, it looks like, on July 8th. And also it's a culmination of 10 months of an enormous amount of work by staff and the 14 committee volunteers that are serving on that committee. So thank you to everybody that's been involved in that long and detailed process. My only other meeting was finance, and we really covered that very thoroughly today. And cultural arts is tomorrow, and the only agenda item, of course, will be preparation for PV Palooza, which is this Saturday. So that group has worked really hard preparing for this event, and it looks like it's going to be awesome. So hopefully people can make it. That's it for me.
Okay, thanks. I was also at the finance committee meeting, and then let's see here, BPTS, which the first meeting I think they had for 3 months or something. They had some people absent, and they had a quorum problem last time, and finally managed to meet again. And there's some commentary there that we've been getting some inconsistent reporting and attendance at the BPTS meeting by the sheriff's office. So a request for the sheriff's office to come more frequently. I think they had some illness issues. There were a couple people in the office who had COVID, and so that was part of the issue. But I think there's been a few months in a row now where that report from the sheriff's office on traffic safety has been less than the police used to. So they were commenting on that. Let's see. Zots Tots, the beginning to kind of gear up preparation for that, which again requires coordination with the sheriff's department. Then I had a wildfire prep, which also has been unable to meet for many months. Finally was able to meet yesterday afternoon. They elected a new chair, Jennifer Hammer, and they're back up and running and working on fire safety stuff, which is good. One of the main items on the agenda was an update from the town attorney on the Brown Act and the lawsuit and Public Records Act requests that have been directed towards that committee and us and others. And an update on that progress of that. A lot of kudos on the wildfire preparedness fair that went off very, very well. We all heard about last time in a council meeting. The home hardening subcommittee gave an update on the status of the R4W Sprint project, which is a group of, I think, 9 or 10 neighbors getting together to coordinate cleanup, vegetation cleanup on their properties. And a discussion also from the Finance and Insurance Subcommittee presenting about expenditures through the budget and possible funding sources and so on. Then Don Bullard was there and gave an update on kind of what's going on at the fire department and all the activities they're working on, planning wise, funding wise, project wise, et cetera. So it's a very thorough update there. And then last night, I was supposed to have a Woodside Highlands Road Maintenance District Resident Advisory Committee meeting, the good old WHRMD-RAC. And that I do not believe happened. I hadn't started 10 minutes in because I think there was some problem with Zoom, so that may be rescheduled. And then also Jeremy and I met with Wynn White and Lenny Roberts from Ladera, because part of the evacuation study looked at the exit through Ladera from Portola Valley on Alpine Road in case of an evacuation, and what various impacts might be. So the county has been considering, and Ladera's have been asking for a roundabout to be put in, or maybe 2 roundabouts at the bottom of La Mesa and La Cuesta on Alpine Road to improve especially I think early morning commute time there, people exiting Ladera. The evacuation study sort of considered what the impact of that would be on an evacuation, and essentially, the purpose of a roundabout is to slow people down when they're trying to go straight. And what you want to do in an evacuation is go straight without slowing down. So the two kind of conflict with each other potentially. So we just wanted to give them a heads up that, we're going to be working on this following this evacuation study. There's also a suggestion the evacuation study potentially partially widen Alpine Road. And so we just wanted to sort of get them up to speed on what we've been doing and help them understand. And Jeremy, I think, is discussing with the county as well, and just trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And we don't plan some evacuation that, depends on there not being a roundabout, and then they put in a roundabout, or they put it in the wrong kind of roundabout, or they put the roundabout in the wrong place, or whatever. So that coordination is ongoing as well. And those were all the meetings that I had. So yes, Marianne.
Can I ask a question about this roundup finding? So the evacuation study that we have commissioned, those folks say roundups would slow down evacuation out of Portola Valley in a wildfire?
It's a little more nuanced than that, but essentially you can increase the speed of the evacuation if you have 2 lanes outbound on Alpine Road.
Yeah.
Because you've got twice the width of road, so you can have twice as many cars per time period. If there's a roundabout, you can't have 2 lanes outbound on Alpine Road, because
Well, I mean,
it would have to collapse down to 1, which would be a
right. But what about the people coming out of Ladera? If there's 2 lanes, they're never going to get out.
well, there'll be a cop standing there directing traffic. So all of this needs to be looked at in more detail, is essentially what the evacuation study says. But because there is an interaction with a potential roundabout there, I just wanted to put it on their radar to say, hey guys, this is what we're thinking about. We should make sure we're all thinking about it together as any changes may happen.
Well, yeah, because I put them together with
Yeah.
Berman and Becker to fund it.
Yep.
Okay.
It may still happen, but
Does
when they're
Horsley,
designing it,
does Horsley know this?
Jeremy can update. He's been talking to I think Mike Callaghan at the county.
Okay, Mike. Okay. All right.
I've shared it with Mike.
Well, I have,
There's a lot more work to do on all of this stuff. But maybe if there is a roundabout, they design it so it's collapsible. So in emergency, you fold it down. I don't know what the options.
collapsible.
I don't know.
Okay.
A really soft berm, so you can just roll over the top of it. I don't know. Okay. Let's see. Is there any public comment on this item? I see David Cardall's hand up. ahead.
Sure. To talk a little more about roundabouts, I think there were three issues. The first one is that a typical single lane roundabout is designed to make traffic run at less than 20 miles an hour, which is great, I think, except in evacuation, it might not be wonderful. So we have to think about that. The second is the horse trailers, of which we have apparently a lot, and would have a hard time in a roundabout, and that would be an issue. And the third would be fire trucks, which also are long and would have an issue. So that said, to the earlier points, you can build a roundabout that has a retractable center that people can go through, or emergency vehicles go through. I assume it's more expensive and might be a little uglier than what we would build or what Stanford has been building, but it's definitely possible. But I think that's to bring up the issues, that those are the things that I think of that are something that need to be considered. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, David. Okay, I see no more hands up from the public, so we'll move on to the next item, the town manager's report.
Thank you. Just a few items. Last week, the town, along with the town of Woodside and Woodside Fire Protection District, hosted our friends from the Community Partners Assistance for Wildfire, or CPAW, included 3 of their employees, and also Dr. Steve Quarles, who is nationally known for his work on fire issues. We were able to talk with him about a variety of topics, including the parcel tax that you heard a little bit about earlier tonight, initiatives in town and the like. And we took them on a tour of the community, and they expressed their concern about the state of defensible space in the community, along with home hardening. They were particularly struck by the number of wood shingled siding and roof structures, particularly in areas like the Woodside Highlands and the like. So it's a message that I think we all understood. It was helpful, certainly, to hear from them their concerns, and it helps us focus future efforts. At a meeting with Patty Dewis, who's the chair of the Parks and Rec Committee, to talk about the council's conversation at the last meeting regarding pickleball. So confirmed the council direction, talked about a couple strategies, mostly around further engagement with the community, particularly the tennis community. It was a good meeting. And I think that is it. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Jeremy, can you update us on how much staff time has been expended on public record acts, lawsuits, and any other wild goose chase sort of things?
Without a specific number, I can say that the town attorney and the assistant town manager have been spending a considerable amount of time on Public Records Act issues. And the town attorney is clearly working on the legal issues aforementioned. We will bring an accounting forward at the appropriate time. I don't know, Cara, if you want anything you want to add there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Then let me see if there's any public comment on this item. Rita's hand is up. Go ahead, Rita.
I'm sorry. I just have to say out loud, as a member of the community, that if the members of the community put in paperwork to research either a public records request or something, it is their right to do so. And I'm on a lot of boards and whatnot, and to call somebody's request that it's not easy for them to write that up and submit it. It's not just a quick email, oh, I have nothing more to do tonight, but to call it a wild goose chase, I just feel bad for my fellow residents in this town. And that's all I have to say on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is also our right to let the public know how much time is being expended on such things. And it is my right to characterize it however I wish. Thank you.
Okay, I see no more hands raised, so we will go to digests, May 26th. Do I have anything on May 26th? No, then June 2nd. Find the, there it is. No? Okay, is there any public comment on item, where are we at? 9A. I see Rita's hand raised. Go ahead,
Yes,
Rita.
I'd like to comment on the letter that's on page 84. That's talking about the ADU ordinance. And I just want to say that, you know, that letter has a lot of information that, that many people in the town have been talking about in the wildfire group, the emergency group, and a lot of other groups in town concerning, you know, the fire risk and the hazard risk in our town. I was, you know, a little bit surprised to see that it's referring to the document that was originally presented by the town council on, I believe it was around December 12th, and it was supposed, that document, that hazard document that was then going to have extra meeting before December 20th, and then it was subsequently signed in the beginning of 2022, although many residents said that the information was incorrect, but it was told that it needed to be signed and moved on because our town was the only one in San Mateo County that had not signed it, and it went on, and it's referred in this particular document. It's just mentioned there, but as a, you know, what was stated in that meeting, when we were told that it was signed, that it was known to be incorrect. I'm just, you know, just want to say it out loud that that document was known to be, has incorrect information about our town, but it is referenced in this particular letter. But I was glad to see that so many other things about hazard and fire risk in our town were mentioned in this particular letter on page 84. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to clarify that I think that's incorrect. The hazard mitigation document is not referenced in this letter. Other elements of hazard mitigation are, but the phrase hazard mitigation is not the same thing as the hazard mitigation document. Okay. Where did my table of contents go? There we go. That brings us to an adjournment to closed session. We are going to be having a conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D and subsection E5. Related to correspondence from a group of Portola Valley residents alleging the Wildfire Preparedness Committee violated the Brown Act and potential lawsuit about that.
Mayor Hughes, can we break for 5 minutes before we join the into the closed session?
We can, and let me take public comment on this item before we adjourn to closed
Fair
session.
enough. Yep.
And then we can pause and then come back in closed session. Is there any public comment on this item? Nope, I see none. So thank you all for coming tonight, members of the public and staff members and everyone else who has been here. We will now go through the process of closing this Zoom meeting and the schoolhouse here in person. And Jeff, how long do you need? About 5 minutes? So call it 9:15. We will resume in closed session.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you all.